There was a little period of time that I took note of with all of you where Marjorie Taylor Greene seemed to be less present politically. She sort of went a little bit quiet, and my suspicion was that someone had requested for her to just don't go as crazy right before the election, because you'll remind people of what the GOP now endorses, and we don't want that, okay? Well, the election's over, so she's back. She's proudly being as crazy as she'd like to, and that's what I want to check in on here. There was a hearing on how to prevent and respond to a potential future pandemic, understanding how poorly prepared, in part because Trump threw out the Obama era initiative that was supposed to make us prepared for a potential pandemic, because we've been suspecting this could happen. And we're not as prepared as we should have been during the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's make sure that doesn't happen again. But as I'm sure you feel, I don't know if MTG is the best person to sort that out for us. And I want to show you first some of what she was saying, then get to Democratic Congressman, friend of the show, Robert Garcia, who had a chance to speak and got into a little bit of a back and forth with Marjorie Taylor Greene. So let's get into this. Again, this is on reflecting on COVID, looking forward, future pandemics, how do we prevent, how do we respond? And Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of the worst and least qualified to be a part of this discussion. While you're watching, please click the subscribe button if you haven't yet. We are very close to 1 million subscribers. I do appreciate that, especially given that the growth has started back up. There's that little post-election dip of interest just because people were feeling so disconnected. I know so many people are still wanting to disconnect because it's painful the moment we're in, but a lot of you are choosing not to, and I appreciate that greatly.
The hearing today is titled Preparing for the Next Pandemic, Lessons Learned in the Path Forward. I think one of the greatest lessons that has been learned here is the government and its powerful agencies should never use the American people's hard-earned tax dollars to create viruses that can be unleashed on the world like COVID-19 was. This led to killing millions of people all over the world. COVID-19 was funded using the gain of function in a biolab in China, and then it was lied about. Dr. Fauci lied to the American people, abusing his power and position and role, very powerful role, paid for by the American tax people. He lied, and many, many people died. Not only that, schools were shut down. People's jobs were shut down. Employment was ended. Small businesses were shut down. Life, as everyone knew it, was shut down. This caused violations of people's First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. People couldn't even go to the beach. Then suicides hit record highs. And the saddest thing is there was record suicide rates seen among children and a mental health crisis released on Americans like never before. Now there's massive delays in education and loss in learning.
Okay, so she continues going through. And the gain of function talking point, I know we spent a while on before, dismantling in detail so that you understand how they get to these bonkers conclusions. It does take time, so I'll leave that in the past segment we did. But quickly put, she's radically misleading people on that and lying. Then I don't like using with Republicans the "they lied so people died" thing, because there's a lot of magnitude that goes along with such a phrase, and we're always dealing with policies that, if you study them, lead to more or less deaths, and putting that on a person can get dangerous quickly because people then morally justify certain things. And so I don't like that. But if she's going to say Fauci lied and people died, if anyone lied and caused deaths because of those lies, a reminder that it was Republicans. The Independent reminds us almost twice as many Republicans than Democrats died of COVID. Study says the gap in death rates between the parties grew substantially after the vaccines were introduced. The Marjories of the world were out there telling people, you shouldn't take it, it's not safe, they're trying to force it to do whatever, and misleading people. And then we saw a spike in the mortality rate among Republicans compared to Democrats because so many of them had been misled about the proper way to respond to that moment. And so is the list of things that she's going through that was an outcome of the pandemic and the lockdowns very real and very painful? Absolutely. Was her publicly contradicting with no evidence to back it up everything medical professionals were saying because it got her clicks and it generated outrage? Was that the way to get us out quickly from that crisis? No. Because how did we get out of it? An adult came into office and took it much more seriously and ended up making it possible to stop the lockdowns and stop these different things. That's a very simple summarization of a very complicated few years, but the lies actually made it harder to get out of such a painful situation where these different protocols were in place. And then did certain leaders make bad decisions, or were they hypocritical? We're going to shut down this, but not this. And there's actually no scientific distinction, but they did it because they had a friend who owns this restaurant. For sure. And hold those people accountable for, in the court of public opinion. But that doesn't mean that the Faucis of the world were misleading people or were, to put it the way she did, lying because of some plot to, I don't even know what the explanation is there. Let's listen a little bit more, then we'll get to Robert Garcia.
Learning. What was absolutely repulsive is the forced masking requirements of children. Children were not at risk of being hospitalized or dying from COVID-19, yet children became one of the worst victims of the malpractice and abuse of power by your agencies and by people in charge in many cities, states, and the government. It was absolutely horrendous.
Okay, so again, we've been hearing this for years from her, and what ultimately she gets into, but I know you are probably sick of hearing her voice, she's misleading people on those things as well, but she goes on to say that Matt Gaetz will prosecute those responsible for crimes against humanity during the pandemic. We've seen her shouting about this before. Crimes against humanity, Fauci needs to be in jail, all because either she's overtly misleading people about the facts of these situations or just genuinely doesn't have enough brain cells to rub together. Here's Robert Garcia.
On day one, and I'm going to show, this is from ABC News, the headline that just appeared a few days ago, which, if we're talking about pandemic preparedness, and with all due respect to the committee and the work, the fact that we're considering to bring somebody on with no scientific or medical credentials, who's falsely claimed for decades that vaccines cause autism, who has, quite frankly, said just outrageous comments about science and medicine, that this person would come in to gut the NIH, I think is shameful. I think is shameful. And Ms. Greene, you can clap all you want, but it is shameful, it's dangerous, and if this committee is about pandemic prevention, we should be very concerned as a country that RFK Jr. could be put in charge of health when he is a vaccine denier and has caused great harm to the American public. I want to say just finally that I'm very concerned that someone that wants to gut the NIH, HHS, and other services could be put in charge of health of any kind.
Yeah, and there he's talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I want to talk about that as well, but you heard Marjorie Taylor Greene clapping. Got the NIH, wee-wee! Does she even know? What is going on in her head? I think about that sometimes. Just sort of, does she just like hear the sounds of, I don't even want to go on that joke. Not much is going on, I guess is the joke I was going to make. You can fill in the blank. That's too mean. She seems to be so proud of her stance that we should gut these organizations. And even if we took her premise, which we shouldn't, but that they're just so corrupt and they purposely did a pandemic to do stuff, why would the solution be to gut them? Wouldn't you just want to improve them, but not necessarily get rid of them or completely defund them? Because they know the reason we have agencies like the NIH or CDC or whatever is to serve a particular purpose and to look out for the well-being of America. Do they always do that perfectly? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that Marjorie Taylor Greene's way is a better way. I'd rather have Fauci in charge, even if he gets things wrong every once in a while, instead of Marjorie, who you can go watch the video on the front page of our channel, has a history of not understanding fact versus fiction. But this Robert F. Kennedy Jr. news, Trump has announced that after years of anti-science advocacy, which, by the way, is stuff that Trump in the past has contradicted, right? Trump wanted to take credit for the Operation Warp Speed in getting the vaccine. He actually, even though he sort of waffles now because of his followers' backlash, he definitely believed the COVID-19 vaccines were safe and effective. And that's why he wanted to take credit. Then he got booed, so he stopped bringing it up, but he definitely believes that. He is picking the guy who's made a career of, among other things, but one of the things that's very damaging and notable is of pushing anti-vaccine, anti-science propaganda and really getting people hurt. We talked about the Samoa example where he came in, bolstered anti-vaccine advocates and emboldened them and helped to spread misinformation that led to a lot of Samoans not getting vaccinated and dying preventable deaths from measles, which is extremely heartbreaking. Apparently that didn't change his view. And now the Department of Health and Human Services, Trump says Robert F. Kennedy Jr., if he gets confirmed by the Senate or is put in through recess appointment, will be in charge of. Put the guy who has a terrible track record on health expertise in charge of Americans' health.
Science on many occasions.
Tiny infinitesimal amounts of mercury, parts per billion, will cause profound neurological injury in children. It's coming from our own vaccine.
COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese.
The capacity for these chemicals that we are just raining down on our children right now to induce these very profound sexual changes in them is something we need to be thinking about as a society.
Even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You can hide in an attic like Anne Frank did. Today, the mechanisms are being put in place that will make it so none of us can run and none of us can hide. They're putting in 5G to harvest our data and control our behavior.
By the way, did you hear that? In Nazi Germany, you could at least you could hide in an attic, but now in modern day America, what he's alluding to, the idea he's alluding to is it's even worse because you can't hide. Something he received justifiable backlash for. And I'm assuming at some point he apologized for saying that, but I'm blanking on if he did or not. And I forgot about that clip. That is just disgusting. This victimhood complex too. It's like Nazi Germany because they want to save us from COVID. And do so through non-mandates. No one was forced by law to get the vaccine. Stop acting like that was the case. Goodness. Then, remember, the people who weren't getting the vaccine as much were dying more. They were proven wrong. No mea culpa. Everyone who takes the vaccine is gonna die. Bill Gates is tracking you. And then, actually, the rollout of the vaccine is what helped us get back to normal. And if this was a part of a big scheme to control us or whatever the claim is, to keep us locked down forever so that capitalism is damaged, so that the rich people don't have as much money because the economy isn't doing as well. What a weird theory. That actually wasn't proven to be the goal because the big bad Democrats got in power and did everything to get us back to normal and to enable more freedom of movement and livelihood by getting us past that pandemic crisis. So proven wrong on every front, but no, it was a trial run because they're going to do that. And then next time they want to lock you down to do the really bad thing, which is, we'll figure out later, then we'll be used to it. See? But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. warned us. Scary. Put that guy in charge, they say. And I always want to add this caveat. I've heard MAGA people I'm a big advocate for health, by the way. And I really do think as a country, we need to take more seriously addressing obesity, for example, and addressing the types of foods that we are so commonly eating that are so bad for us. Totally. A lot of MAGA people, especially fitness-oriented people, are won over by Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s rhetoric on that. But don't you think if we're going to make such a monumental change on those sorts of issues, we'd need someone who's qualified to do so? If he doesn't have the critical thinking skills to figure out why, when he releases these books about vaccine injuries, why those are so disprovable and he's completely wrong, you think he's qualified or capable of reversing this decades-long trend of us becoming less healthy by many metrics? Probably not, would be my guess. You also have Sanjay Gupta on CNN saying this.
Gupta. Sanjay, I know you like to steer clear of politics, but this really isn't about politics, because this is somebody who has been, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has been pushing quackery, who has been pushing lies, who has been pushing conspiracy theories. You've been talking to experts in the health community, the medical community, preparing for him, RFK Jr., to be given some sort of role in health. What have they said to you?
Well, it's not often that the entire medical and public health community is going to be in lockstep on something, but they're pretty close on this in terms of their significant concerns, horror even. Somebody said to me today, I can't think of any single individual who'd be more damaging to public health than RFK. Keep in mind, I think if the reporting's correct and the job is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, that comprises the CDC. We just got through this pandemic, comprises the FDA, comprises the NIH. He's talked about wanting to basically strip funding for infectious diseases overall. Again, just coming out of this pandemic with concerns about other viruses and things out there. The challenge, I think, is that at the same time, there is this whole idea that we're not a very healthy country. We spend $4.5 trillion on healthcare, and we have some of the worst outcomes in the developed world. And our food supply and other things are partly to blame, things that he's talked about. So there's these kernels of agreement with regard to the medical establishment and the public health establishment in particular. But then there's these other things, like Caitlin was just talking about, that they're not alternative views, they are false views.
I'm so happy you brought that up. Exactly. This happens so often too. People will hear someone say something they agree with, and that means that they can see past such destructive things. No. We can't see past something that directly relates to one of the agencies he'd be overseeing. Numerous of the agencies. That is indicative of a complete lack of capability, like I said, and qualifications, and background, and experience, and views to be in such a powerful position. But Bobby, he loves women, and he loves health. So you can do whatever you want, Bobby, as Trump has said. Because again, as we talked about in the Elon Musk segment, Trump does not see the functioning of government as the serious thing that it is. He just thinks, I'll just put my buddies and people I've made deals with to endorse me in charge of things and see how it turns out. And then when we see, if we do, terrible economic, public health, etc. outcomes from the Trump administration, they'll hand it over to a Democratic administration. And Fox News will say, why are these diseases on the rise under President whoever? It'll be great, just like they did last time. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Support the show by clicking the join button below to get the members only bonus show.